Hi, everybody. My name is Mike Donahue, and you are actually on the first podcast for Groomed.Connect. Excited to have you guys here. This is the very first one. We are going to be having a co host, Brian May, and another co host at times, Steve Hayes, a friend of mine who's an ex pastor of the Assemblies of God. Um, but I wanted to take this first podcast and introduce myself to you. My name is Mike Donahue, like I said, and I'm from Boston, Massachusetts. I grew up in South Boston. I grew up in a dysfunctional home. I kind of want to give you a little history on why I wrote this book. That this podcast is based on the book and based on some of the principles that are in the book, and we're going to get into that. But I wanted to give you a little history on me and kind of why I did this. I grew up in Boston, like I said, and it was a dysfunctional situation. My dad left when I was 5. My mom probably shouldn't have had kids. She came from a long line of abuse. There was a lot of really bad stuff that happened in our home. Um, I was born in the 60s, and I was born into serious dysfunction. I mean, the history in our family gets into incest, it gets into alcoholism and arson and all kinds of crazy stuff when you do an ancestry search on both sides, my mom and my dad's. It is really pretty crazy. And so um, when I was 5 and my dad left, it left a pretty big vacuum. My mom and I just never really got along that well, mainly because I wanted a relationship with my father, and she was, pretty much against all that. And so I'm not going to get into the details. You can read the book, but basically, it was pretty contentious. And so there was a vacuum that was kind of created in my life for love. Like I wanted love. I wanted someone to care about me and to invest in me, and for me to feel like my value was real, and that somebody actually valued me and cared about me and my family. And it just wasn't there. My brothers and sisters were conditioned to basically, I was the scapegoat, and I was the reason why there was all the craziness in the family. And so it just became really contentious in our home, and I was acting out, rebelling in school and getting in fights and different things like that, and got involved with um, some men in my community. Two different situations that happened to me, where there's some men in my community reached out to me to try to be my friend, and at first I went along with that because I thought they were genuine. I thought they really cared about me and wanted to be in my life. They used love, and we'll get into that in these podcasts, but they used love bombing and those grooming techniques to lure me into a inappropriate relationship with them. And I was molested by both of those men in two different situations. And it really left me in a bad situation. We're going to get into some of that stuff in some of these podcasts and some of the specifics, but bottom line is, obviously that was pretty devastating to me, and it created this vacuum inside of me that I really was looking for love in the wrong places. And the situation in my family escalated with my mom. We ended up in a domestic violence situation where I had to go to the hospital, and then after that, the Department of Human Services interfered, or intervened, I should say, in my family, and moved me out of the house. So they didn't put me in foster care, but my junior year, my senior year, they emancipated me. So they gave me my own, they gave me money. They gave me a couple $100 a month, but it wasn't enough. So I worked as a dishwasher at a local restaurant. Was alone. I had a restraining order, against my mom, and I couldn't really be around the family. I did have a girlfriend at the time, but it was kind of on and off again type of thing. And so I was alone. I was pretty much alone. If it wasn't for, I had 4 teachers that were amazing: Miss Cipolo, Mrs. Kenny, Mrs. Kelly, and Coach Bartasek. They were awesome to me. I mean, they were amazing. If I hadn't had them in my life, I wouldn't have made it. I mean, they didn't do my work for me or anything, but they got me through school. And so I got my diploma, and I just knew I needed to get out of Boston. So I got into the Air Force, and still do not regret that decision. That was probably one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life. I got out of Boston, kind of fresh start, but I was still really reeling from, what happened to me? Like what was that about? That was so much dysfunction and hurt and pain and my involvement in it too. It wasn't like I was innocent. I did a lot of wrong things. I partied, smoked, pot and drank and that kind of thing. And then when I went to the military, I didn't do any drugs because they drug test in the military, but I was drinking a lot and still self-medicating. I was medicating all the junk that happened to me. And so that's where I was at. I was 19, girl crazy and drinking and all that stuff. And a girl came up to me in the base that we all knew. We knew who she was because she was a very attractive girl, and she was kind of the talk of the base. And she came over to me one night just randomly and asked me if I would be willing to go to church with her. And I remember thinking in my head, I would probably join a cult with you. So whatever you want to do, right? And little did I know that I got involved. I'm not going to say in a cult, but it was cult like. I got involved with this church. I started going, and right away, I was impressed because there was so many people there. There was hundreds of people, young people that were there. It was called Sperino, and it stood for Spiritual Revolution. Now it was fantastic. I mean, there was a lot of activity. The leader of the group was a woman, and she was very bombastic and energetic and talked about God like I'd never heard before. I grew up Catholic and really wasn't Catholic. I went once in a while, but I never heard anything like this. It was amazing to me, and the community that I was involved with was good too. The first year I was there, I kind of went in and out and tried different things, but the first year I was there was really important because I really wasn't known by anybody. I mean, I was one of hundreds of people that were going every week, and kind of a unknown, just slipping in, slipping out, still kind of, really not understanding everything. And so I felt this draw to it because I really wanted to have a relationship with God in my life, but I didn't know what this meant. And as I listened to the sermons and participated in worship, I began to really connect with God. And again, an unknown, just kind of going, but I got the attention of some leaders there, and they pulled me into their high school ministry group, and I began as a low level leader. They called it a deacon, and I was a deacon in a small group, and I loved it. I mean, I was immediately drawn to helping people. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't understand all this spiritual and religious dogma that was going on, but I liked being in people's lives. I liked encouraging them, and I liked being funny. I'm very funny, and so I liked all that. I did all that. I really fell in love with that part of it. And little by little, the training I was receiving was helping me become an asset to them. Um, I, I little by little, was building relationships with people, and then they gave me a small group to run down in Council Bluffs, Iowa. And Council Bluffs, Iowa, at that time, was kind of a lot like the town that I grew up in. It was kind of rough, and um, there was a lot of rough kids. There was a lot of rough situations. Family dynamics were a lot like mine and my friends growing up. And so I felt real at home there. I loved it. Ended up being involved with that ministry, and it grew exponentially. And what I realized right away is if your group grew, if you were an asset to that ministry, you got the attention of those leaders. I mean, they were all over you. I mean, when I was an unknown, just kind of going, nobody. I tried to get lunch appointments with people, and I tried to be in their lives, and I was just blown off. But as soon as I started to my ministry started to grow, and that affected their lives, all of a sudden I'm a commodity, and I'm getting the attention of the group. And I didn't put two and two together at the time. I just thought, oh, this is the way it goes. So I got involved in it, and there was this weird tension of, I was trying to get the attention of the leaders so I could feel valued, but I also really liked doing what I was doing. I really liked helping kids. And so I got involved, and I loved it. But bottom line is, what I it was that weird tension of, you know, I know God was talking to me, and I know there was some reality to this experience I was having, but I was also seeing some things that weren't right. I was feeling like there was this merit system, like the metrics we used for success had to do with numbers. It had to do with building your group. There was this pressure when we went to leadership meetings to build your group. It was, and you got called out if you didn't do the things that you needed to do to build your group. It was all about getting the numbers of the group. They would actually have you every week say how many came to your group. So there was this weird tension going on, with all the other leaders, that, you were getting the attention of the big guys if you did these things. And so, again, not knowing all the dynamics of that, I got involved in it. And I don't want, the book goes through all that, so I'm not going to get into all that, and we'll unpack some of that in these podcasts. But what I want to talk about is that grooming technique. I'm going to fast forward to years later, after being involved in it for so long, and then my marriage falling apart, and some of my friends abandoning me, and just really coming to a devastating point in my life, that I started looking back at some of the techniques. And what happened to me was, I got this, it took me like 10 years of being out of the ministry, not doing that anymore, to get this bird's eye view of what exactly happened, from A to Z, from the time I was in Boston to now, watching this process take place. And so, grooming uh, is a process. The definition that I found here is, I named the book Groomed because I realized that that's what happened to me. I was groomed by these guys in Boston, but I was also groomed by the church. So grooming actually is a process by which an individual builds a relationship with a person, often with the intent to exploit them emotionally, spiritually, financially, or even sexually. And all of those things happened to me. I was exploited sexually in Boston, but as I got more involved in the church and saw, um, you know, what happened to me in that process, it really mirrored that. It was a lot like that. They used love to lure me in. They rewarded me when I performed, and when I was no good to them, they bailed. And we're going to get in this podcast. We're going to get into the specifics of the process. We're going to have a couple of podcasts probably, yeah, dedicated to the process, and individual, break that down and see where that is. So we'll get to that later. But that was where I was at. I was at that place where I was like, wait a minute, this was a process. This was the same grooming techniques that these pedophiles used. That's what happened to me in the church. And again, I'm painting this with a broad brush. And if you do read the book, you'll see that I'm more detailed about it in the book, and we're going to get detailed on this podcast. But for the sake of the first one, I'm kind of giving an overview of kind of what happened. But I released this book a week ago, and it's been unbelievable. I mean, nothing negative yet. I'm sure I'm going to get it. I'm sure I'll get negative, stuff, but that's okay. I get it, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But most of it has been the Me Tooers, the people going Me Too, Me Too, Me Too. It's been overwhelming to me to get these responses. My phone's been ringing off the hook. My phone's been blowing up with social media, private messages, public messages saying thank you, thank you, thank you, for calling out the truth. Because a lot of people feel this way. A lot of people feel like they got involved in church, and when they were good for the church, when the church was benefiting from their participation, they got the accolades, they got emotional connection, they got the friendship, they got the love that they promised, right? And where I was at growing up was, I was love starved. So when they started talking about the world's love being different than God's love, and God's love being different, and the church's love being different than the way the world is, I was in. I was like, yeah, I want in, because that's what I got hurt by. That I got hurt. I got devastated by people in my life in Boston that promised love, promised dedication to me, and then used me sexually and emotionally. And then when they were done, they were done. Now I was watching it happen in the church. I was like, wait, they're done with me. So now we're not friends anymore. I'm not good for their ministry. I'm not producing in their ministry anymore. So this love that they promised, this devotion they promised is gone. And that blew me out of the water. I did not expect that. I feel foolish now because I'm like, well, wait, didn't you should have saw that, because that's human nature. That's what people do. But they promised that they weren't like the human nature world that I grew up in. They promised that they were different. They said, oh no, God's love is different. And I do believe God's love is different, but our love is different. We're the church, and we're going to love you the way God loves you. And that just wasn't true in my situation. And not just my situation, but a lot of situations. A lot of people have been coming forward. There are definitely people from my ministries, the groups that I was involved in Rockford, Illinois, and Denver, Colorado, and certainly Bellevue, that are coming on and saying, yeah, me too, and giving their own account of what happened. But there's also people outside that I've never met, that I probably will never meet, that are saying the same things. In my church, in my ministry, this is what happened to me. I was groomed. I was told one thing, and then you know, then abused and put out. And so I I feel like for such a time as this, I need to make this book available to people, and to make this podcast available, and other ways to communicate to people um, what happened to them, and why this is, why why the confusion. There's a lot of confusion, like what happened to me. Like, is God, is this way God, is this the way God is God temporary love? Is it love to get something? And we know that when Jesus died on that cross, there was no expectations. It was unconditional. We preach that, we say that, right, all the time. It's unconditional. He loved you no matter what. But we don't live that, right? We don't. And so we don't do that with each other, and it gets confusing. It's like, well, wait, what is it then? And so this, since I've released the book, there's been um, more more cover-ups, more things that have come out, that people are saying, like, we saw really bad stuff too, and bad stuff happened to me. And again, I'm not trying to call, this book isn't to call people out specifically, even though I did. It isn't to call them out on purpose. I'm not. It's not a revenge tour, a revenge book. It's not. It's to call them out so we could see some restoration. Every single one of those people that I mentioned in the book, I didn't mention everybody that I talked about. I used other names, and I was vague about some things, but there's some people I specifically called out. And those people, I went to them several times and asked them to have conversations with me about this, and they refused to do that. And so, yeah, I mean, that's the way it goes. And so, um, I, and again, since I've released the book, there has been more people getting brave enough to say, okay, this happened to me. And some of these situations are pretty crazy. And I can't say now, because of, I just can't. But I will at some point, if those people give me permission, I will do that. But there's been some stuff that's been revealed to me that has been absolutely crazy. And so, somebody might ask me, and I've been asked this, are you angry? Is that why you're doing this? Are you mad at the people that hurt you? I'm going to be honest with you and say yes. I know what I'm supposed to say right now is no. It's all for the love of the ministry. I'm going to be honest and say there's some of that, but some of it is I'm angry. And the Bible says be angry. It does. It says be angry, but don't sin. Don't be destructive. Don't flail around with your anger and just hit everything that moves. Be constructive about it. Use your anger as a platform, and that's what I'm trying to do here. Yeah, I'm angry. I'm angry at myself. I really am. I'm angry at me. I'm angry because I participated in that. I hurt people. I saw it. I groomed people. I tried to get people to do things for me, free labor, and all that kind of stuff, manipulated them with love, and then change the script on them, right? It's that bait and switch. I love you, I love you, I love you. And then when it's over, it's over. And I was disgusted with myself. And part of the process of writing this book has, last summer when I was writing it, I had to go for a walk a couple times and just take deep breaths and be like, yeah, I did this. I need to own this. I need to own what I did. And as far as as far as I know, I have gone to the people, I don't know everybody that got hurt by my ministry, but the ones I do know, and I do know, I called them and I've talked to them over the years. I've tried to make it right with those people. And to the point where next week, I'm going out to Colorado and I'm going to sit with a guy because I know I hurt him and he's been pretty honest about the pain of that. And so I don't want to just do it over the phone. I'm going to go sit with him. And those of you, if you're watching this right now and you're like, Mike, you know what? I could use a conversation. I promise you, I'll get on a plane. I'll get on a plane. I'll come where you are and I will sit with you, look at you in the face and say, I'm sorry for my participation in manipulating and trying to get what I want through your life. That's just ridiculous. It's not the gospel. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry I did that. And I will own that. And yeah, I'm angry at the people that I'm not angry at people that look at this person's ministry that groomed me and they're like, "Oh, she did so much for me." And I don't agree. I don't disagree with you. I saw a lot of good things. I know there were good things. I'm not angry at you at all. I get it that you benefited greatly from this person's love in your life and you went on and that's great. But those of you that saw what I saw, you saw the abuse, you saw the neglect, you saw the lying, the gossip, the slandering, the gaslighting. You saw that. You saw people's lives get ruined. I'm angry at you. I'm angry at you if you don't call it out. Those of you, and I'm not going to name them now, but I will name them at some point if I have to. If they don't come clean and go, yeah, I worked for her too in Bellevue, in Rockford, in Atlanta. If you were in the room when she was destroying lives, and you're not willing to call that out, you're not willing to say, yeah, I saw that, then you know what? Yeah, you're probably going to be exposed by me at some point because that's wrong. That's wrong. And that's what's happening in the body of Christ. We just keep covering this stuff up. I'm not an end times guy. I don't know, but I've heard people say, well, we're in the end times and they use that scripture that says, that God's going to judge the church first. I don't know if that's happening, but I'm going to say this: God's judging the church. I mean, you can't turn on the news anymore. You can't get on Facebook without seeing some ministry that's been exposed for devious behavior, for these kind of things that are hurting people. The best scripture I've ever read on this stuff is Ezekiel chapter. I put it in the book. It's Ezekiel chapter 34, verses 1 through 10, where it breaks down what happens to shepherds, what happens to the sheep when shepherds stop shepherding, when shepherds start taking care of themselves and feeding their egos and feeding their bank accounts and using people, using the sheep to get what they want. It hurts people. It hurts them. It leaves them stranded. They don't have guidance and they don't have protection because the shepherds are too busy taking care of themselves. And that's in the Bible. It's Ezekiel chapter 34, verse 1 through 10. God's looking down going, enough is enough. And back in those days, he called those shepherds out and he said, I'm going to remove you. I'm going to remove you from shepherding these sheep because you don't know what you're doing. You're just taking advantage. And I think that's going on today. I think that what's happening with the deconstruction movement, with thousands of people leaving the evangelical churches, with pastors retiring, I think that's what we're seeing. We're seeing God saying enough is enough. We've got to get back to a shepherding system that cares about the sheep. And listen, I'm not saying that every pastor is doing this. I know there's a lot of really good pastors out there that love their people, that feel like they're called to shepherding the sheep, and they do the right stuff by them. They're involved in people's lives. I know for a fact there are thousands of pastors that are doing that. but I'm talking about the superstars. I'm talking about the people who get all the attention. They write the books. They're the ones that, that we're heralding from on high, that they're great and they're doing all these things. And they're the ones behind the closed doors that are abusing people, using people. Their character is not Christ-like, and they're getting the attention. So we go, oh, these guys are great. They're superheroes, right? And here's this guy in Ogallala, Nebraska, that's just taking care of his people, showing up at the hospital visits, doing what he needs to do. And he's not, his name isn't on a book, right? He's just a guy doing it right. But we're heralding these superstars, and they're the ones that we want to follow. And that's just God. I think God's tired of that. I really do. I think we got to get back to shepherding people and caring about people and being involved in their lives. And the end of in chapter, I think it's in verse 10 in chapter 34 in Ezekiel, it says, when this has happened, when we neglect the sheep, they become food for the wild animals. And I've been involved in high school working in high schools and speaking in schools and hearing hundreds and hundreds of people's stories, young people's stories. That's all I can say is that the shepherds are gone. And so these kids are just getting devastated. They're getting annihilated. Last year, a girl I was sitting there talking to her, and she was telling me that her dad, when she was 13, she was a senior in high school, she was going to college, she got through it because some teachers got her through it, right? It wasn't a youth group, it wasn't a church, and I'm not bashing on every church, but I'm just saying this specific girl, some teachers got her through it. Now she's going to college, but when she was 13, her dad sold her for $168 to one of his friends for a night of rape because he needed money for drugs. This is this is happening all over the world. This is what God's watching every single day, while these shepherds are just feeding themselves, and these churches are becoming, these mega churches, and these superstars are writing their books and doing their things. And listen, I know there's a place for that, but we have got to get back to loving people and getting in the trenches and caring about people's lives. Otherwise, the church is just ridiculous. And so I know it's not. I know it has potential to be amazing again, and I'm in. I want to help that. I want to do what I can to make that happen. And so that's what this podcast is about. It's not just about bashing the church and bashing the people that hurt me. It's about exposing the lies, exposing the wrong system, and building back the system that I think God would be honored to have. And so we're going to be doing that. And that's what this podcast is about. So thank you for letting me ramble a little bit here. Again, we're going to be bringing on guests, experts on grooming, experts on sexual abuse and spiritual abuse. We're going to be bringing on co-hosts that have dealt with some of these things as well. And we want to help, just want to help. And so like our page, at the end of this video, there'll be a way you can contact us. All our information will be on there. My website is www.MikeDonahueConnects.com. That has all the information on there. Instagram and this YouTube channel. Follow this YouTube channel. Spread this around. Get people to get on this. And every week we're going to have a new podcast. Eventually, we're going to have a podcast this will be a podcast. But right now, we're just going to put it on YouTube, and then we'll be getting it on Spotify and Apple Music and all that, on Apple Podcasts and all that. So thanks again for watching this today, and God bless all of you that are watching this. Take care.